Hello, and welcome to another episode of my pop-up dungeon Let's Plays. Northstar, I hope you folks are well. Taking care of each other, being kind to yourselves. Working my way through the training fights here. This campaign. For those of you welcome. Haunted house, huh? I didn't even bother to look at what the setup was. For those of you new to this series, welcome. You can check out from, well, the beginning, although that's not many videos ago. I have everything organized in a playlist, or you can check out my other earlier campaigns, runs. Pop-up dungeon, I've done a number, and I'll be doing a number more.
I'm up next to
For those who new to my channel, I struggle. For those who new to my channel, I've struggled with long COVID for many years here. The terrible disease, and I've had it for going towards 5 years now. So, this guy is actually pretty tough if he gets behind you, and not that dangerous otherwise. He likes to transform. I should be wary of this ability.
Never turn. Face from the cold.
Yep. Lucy can migrate to a killed character in your party.
We are pilgrims in
This ability is pretty annoying.
unholy land.
I find this to be one of the more irritating haunted house type enemies. Let me just pause and set this up off camera. Alright, this will have to do. Let's go.
I will fear no evil. Repent.
Each is always an 84% chance to proc now. I reduced that since he gets 3. Oh, one of them's on cooldown. This is haste 67. Actually, it's surprisingly more. Once it gets to 100%, he doesn't have to worry about that. Anyhow.
I give you my hearth.
Boom. Go here so Dracula has a hard time getting behind him.
I do not seek glory.
Ulrich's a little more important to receive extra shielding than Hrothgar. Wasn't that much, it was 68. Since he has resurrects. Of course, it's not going to be nearly enough for some of these enemies like that. this blunt. That's right. Hmm. Don't even get through the shield.
Time for some explosive action.
Given how much health. Yeah, this should be tougher. This. Oh yeah, this is by far the nastiest. Through the shield.
I'm not used to all this darkness.
Hmm.
Where is my hat? Let's risk a little magic.
Flaming rocks. And Fortis. Maybe? Pretty sure I just made that happen. Hmm. Guess there's no way I could ever get there. Alright. 4 against elemental, bad against earth. This werewolf is nasty. I'm sure you guys have seen me get wiped by werewolves before. I have high armor pen and enough power to take down multiple members of my party in a turn. At this kind of difficulty level anyways.
I want to suck your blood. Don't let the blood go to your head.
Doesn't have much armor pen in bat form though. Draco.
I have friends in dark places. Gotta burn off these sweet.
Revive Mist,
We are
thankfully.
pilgrims in an unholy land.
I don't have to deal with the young witch coming back as an adult one. Yeah, only 23 armor pen when in bat form. Little tiny bat fangs instead of, well, it's actually a rather large bat, but still not all like the Draco man form.
Warm your hands by the fire, friend.
That didn't give him any mobility back. Oh well.
A divine favor.
Alright, no waste AP. I'm sure that's more than enough.
Never turn your face
survivability for Hrothgar. Now.
Stay close.
Miss again. Doing this triggers the Pharaoh's curse. Really can't do that. Don't need to smack roll that either. By the way, for Brock.
I bring the flame.
You're not gonna like this.
I don't have to worry about Dracula. You're back there now. Sorry about yawning. I'm always tired. Seems like I could do this. I'm outside of retaliation range, interestingly. Oh, Ulrich's still for the path for that ranged belly. Unparable. Yeah. Through magical pair.
Darkness will not rise.
He's an earth mage, so, you know, earth in the naturey sense and earth in the more rock sense. People think of rocks as part of nature, but they're just inanimate objects. They're not life forms, you know. Unless you listen to, like, Native Americans. Today's graduate student I had teaching a class once who was of the opinion that everything, even like chairs, which are obviously dead wood at that point, or alive. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is animism. This is like neo-animism. Animism is this kind of strange belief that everything's alive. 12:55, 29:03. I forget, but I don't think good a time as any experiment. I'm doing well. Oh, yeah, no. Okay, the buffs from Sanctify do apply to our own abilities. Wasn't sure if self buffs were absolved from that. I guess to be the word. So she can sanctify herself to do more with her. Always. Bat form is about to end. I guess I could do this to the Fortis since it can be reached.
I'll resurrect you.
Effort is the magic of man. Wait, why is this levitated? Oh, water walking. Oh, this is a jet. Stun, which if I remember correctly prevents the retaliation. Yep. It's no Pharaoh's Curse. I got those bandages nice and wet. Mummy bandages. Uh, hmm. Eh. Oh. Let's deal with Dracula. Unless she have a self heal? Not a very effective playtime. Uh, let's just deal with this. Vent resurrects.
I'll be waiting in the shadows.
Yeah, you're creepy as hell. Huh. Yeah, I'm missing die damage over time anyways.
I'm not a morning person. That's what I call a megabyte download. You've got to tell me if you're a vampire hunter.
My wrath undoes the wicked.
Says who? I don't have to tell you I'm a vampire hunter.
Warm your hands by the fire, friend.
Oh, it's high mobility. Cool.
Go back to the
Might be able to make it to Dracula this turn. Maybe.
I walk through the valley. My path is righteous.
You'll never get me in my Transylvania mist.
Siphoned 5 AP.
Time is the right time. This sucks. There's a lot at you're driving me back. This sucks. I hope I never. Don't get mad. Get thirsty. You're driving. Don't cross me. I hope I never. I hate when the clot thickens.
The clot thickens. And Hrothgar siphoned so much AP he's 2 away from the limit.
Your face from the cold.
How much you can spend a turn, or obtain even. I think it was actually. Huh. Boom.
Don't cross me. This will simplify everything.
I'm aware.
This sucks. Don't cross me. There's a lot at stake here. Don't get mad. Get thirsty. I hate when the clot thickens. Let's make this quick.
Hmm. Massive overkill.
The flame will never die.
I hope not. He's referring to like the flame of justice will never die. That would be nice. In theory, in our own world, we really could use a little more justice, to say the least.
Hmm. Oh, this is just stylish. Stole instead of the version I made, which is a little more useful. I mean, really, people act like, oh, it's, I don't know, they get all depressive and, oh, the world sucks, humanity's a plague. No, the world sucks because of capitalism, because you have a handful of billionaires
Oh wait, is that loot?
with immense power, and yes, they don't
Clean this off for me, please.
do it all directly, but they use their power to warp the culture in ways that cause downstream damage, others to do bad things, and empower, multimillionaires in turn find, upper middle managers to screw over their employees on their behalf, and I mean, it's hierarchy. Capitalism is based on hierarchy. People seem to forget this or not wish to accept this fact, but ultimately capitalism is about the private ownership of the means of production. It says private ownership like it's owning your car. No, it's owning factories, farms, mines, and not anybody, because ordinary people can't. That's actually socialism if ordinary people own the factories, farms, mines, stuff like that, collectively. Now I'm thinking about Centauri. Let's play where, I'm putting up farms and mines everywhere and running planned economy as the peacekeepers. So socialism. Century planned socialism, market socialism is actually a real world thing too. In that game, the free drones can run free market, so I suppose if you choose that faction, you'd be doing market socialism. Get speed to Brock instead.
Sometimes greed is a necessary evil, a boon to our cause.
Rothgar goes down too easy. Let's give Ulrich the survivability. The reflexes. 22 minutes. I haven't had another level here in this video.
These elven armies have seen much suffering.
I'm reminded by this jerkwad comedian mocking someone for. Someone asked, "Why aren't you a socialist?" He says, "Did I say anything about the private ownership means of production?" The guy said, "Oh, well, you like buying a lie." He tried to misinterpret that as, "Oh, this guy's saying buying is a socialist." The guy was not saying that. This comedian is just a nasty liberal who wanted to make fun of leftists. The guy asked why he's one a socialist, anarchist, or communist. Of course, all communists are socialists, but not all socialists are communists, so those are not synonymous terms. Which I'm sure some people will also say when they hear that. But anyways, it's funny, my mind wanders playing these games. And it gives me lots of varied commentary. But it's Chimazine, an ogre. I guess this and a smithy. His enchanted armor. Pretty nasty. He goes around guarding everyone and has very high defense. Although Shimazine's the only real killer in their party. Ogres aren't too bad. They don't have armor pen, although the raw power is not to be trifled with. Oh no, they have a Pegasus that I forget these can hit pretty hard. Actually. Alright, so Chimazine and Pegasus, take those down. Bat swarms, never too much of a concern. Does some damage, but not crazy hard. The forest is an armored marksman. So, real weaknesses other than just Well, should just be kept back. Indirect fire support, basically. Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a fairly uncontroversial statement for anyone who has even a vague understanding of history or politics to say that capitalism is about the private ownership of the means of production. That is, which are the factories, farms, mines. They often say things like that to make it very clear what that term means, because it's a term that most people don't know what it means, or they just
I'm not used to all this stuff.
get weird ideas based on propaganda in their head that are inaccurate. So, just define your terms. It's important. It's always important in any kind of discussion.
All right, it's my turn now.
Chimzine doesn't have any kind of leap. So, probably go for Brock. Brock's in the way. I suppose the ogre might try and... Chimzine goes first. Let's go here. I can move further. Should be in range of Jane.
These elven eyes have seen much suffering.
Yep, get behind Smithy and try and stun. Chimzine doesn't love fire, water, or air. Not trashy if I lose this character. They fall in battle. The Fortis has cosmic karma, so actually can be a little more forward.
I will fear no evil.
So capitalism is about the private ownership of means of production, but in order for that to be effectivized, big word, I know. But long before I got long COVID, I was a brilliant student and something of a renaissance man. I mean, my area was science, but I was very, very good at picking up at a variety of fields. Not every field. I'm not going to claim it as some absolutely, I don't know, perfect at everything. That's nonsense. Nobody is. But I was bad at music, dance. That makes dating hard, by the way. People have assumptions of how you dance, and you know what? I'm not going to go any further into that. But bad at music, bad at dance. Bad at foreign languages. So no Engels. Friedrich Engels could speak like 7 languages fluently. He's one of the great polyglots. That is someone who can speak many languages of history. One of the best known ones. But yeah, in order to, having a large vocabulary doesn't mean you're intelligent anyways. But the ability to use it correctly, that's a different thing sometimes. And to use it skillfully, although, like, not just correctly, but with skill in a way that gets exactly the meaning you're aiming for. Although I'm not nearly as good at those things as I was before long COVID, where I used to write a lot of poetry and stuff like that.
I still have faith in man.
My wrath undoes the wicked. Repent.
And it says more variability, higher chance to kill. Cool. Success.
Darkness will not rise.
Took down one of the two most dangerous enemies. It's just Chimazine. Generally, you want to take down the DPS and avoid the tanks if possible in a fight at the very beginning. Avoid wasting effort trying to take down the tanks quickly. You can wear them down after they're deprived DPS and support. Chimazine hits hard, so.
Dawn will call upon your light.
All right, it's my turn now.
Yeah, it's her turn, and just need to survive. Yeah, this will make the fight go quicker, even though it might be better to guard the fortress. If this thing survives, you know? Ooh, yeah, Chimazine really doesn't like water. Versus Skitty Titty Belly. You know, I should have used this first to stun her. Oops. Mistake made. Let's enchant armors. Ow. So I really should finish my thought here instead of going off into me tangents. Ooh. You can't underestimate the ogre, as I think I was saying, even though it's not the most dangerous. But it's the ability to hit multiple party members, especially when they're pumped up like that. Not to be trifled with. Yeah. Prop may have saved Kappa. Went down. Great.
Put your faith in the light. I walk through the valley.
Here I can make sure he doesn't heal Brock instead of Jane if things get bad.
Who needs saving?
You might need saving soon the way this is going. Let's use this to get more powerful buffs. Crit chance helps with that. This is the aim.
Eternal dawn, light the way.
He's got one intervention for a couple turns, so cool. Give her. She can't give herself full intervention. Darn. Sorry.
You're not gonna like this.
Headbutt the ogre though, maybe.
So my thought. So steal some defense. This because it doesn't damage itself. To endure is to conquer sometimes. So capitalism is about the private ownership of the means of production, right? It's not always, I mean, way back in the day, a lot of socialist theorists were writing, that was often, someone actually opened a factory and owned the factory, or, they inherit it from their father or grandfather, but it was direct private ownership. These days, it's much more often, you have like these private equity firms and such that very, very wealthy people own stock in, essentially, or, well, I mean, it's not stock exactly, private equity firms, remember, but, they have mutual funds, private equity firms, stuff like that. And they just collect money for having money, essentially, which is not so different than I wonder if this is a trigger. Probably. A lot of damage being sent to Brock. Not so different than what Marx wrote about. He had to, get at the more obscure ways that the direct factory owners were being rewarded for, well, their ownership of investment capital, and not actually the labor they were putting into managing a company. But it's much more obvious when somebody just owns stock in a mutual company. If anything, it's become more obvious that Marx was correct with time, which is why there's more propaganda than in the past. And so people don't think that's the case because, you get all this media that lies to people and tries to fool them about what's going on in the world. Alright,
Nothing we couldn't handle.
but whether it's a factory owner or someone who owns stock in an investment firm, do this could hurt quite a little, but I'll probably get it's good enough later. Those who own capital are massively outnumbered by those who do not. I mean, technically, we live in an era lots of people have a little bit of money in the stock market, a few $1,000s. Heck, even I have a few thousand in the stock market. My life savings from before I got long COVID that's getting depleted, and once it's gone, because the government's not giving me nearly enough. State government's the only thing that's giving me any help. The feds screw me out of SSDI because of a rule out in the mid-90s. And it's not nearly enough to live on, so when that runs out, I'm really screwed. Not to mention Medicaid and food stamps cuts. Which are going to get even less adequate what help I'm already getting.
Let's pray things go easier from now on.
I don't actually use that much healthcare anymore because there's no actual treatment for long COVID, so I don't actually go to doctors that often. So the Medicaid is in a way less of an issue unless I develop future complications of the disease than is the food stamps cuts, which it's already not enough with some of the special dietary needs I have. Government apparently wants me to starve to death because I can't work. I'm too sick to work.
I humbly humbly accept this gift.
I've been too sick to work, so unless something changes, unless I make a miraculous recovery, or I pray all the time, and I'm a person of faith, so maybe I'll see a miracle from my prayer. But otherwise, you know, miracles are exceptionally rare in the world. Not so many things that they happen all the time. So, yeah.
Knowledge is power. That's not bad either.
Target tile next to nearest ally. And chop isn't a super useful ability. And this could turn James so that like his back is to enemy I don't want. I'm just gonna get rid of this. So the capitalists, those who own investment capital, are massively outnumbered by those who don't. Establish that. I think that's pretty self-evident, but you can look up the numbers if you're curious. And I'm not talking about small people, people who live primarily off their investments. They may work, but what the money they make from their investments is far, far greater than what they make from work. That's what Marx called the high bourgeoisie. Very small group. Most people don't have that much investment capital. There's people who work and substantially supplement their income from investment capital. That's the petite bourgeoisie. In Marx's area, he talked about like small business owners, but this could actually be someone who just works, as a labor, but then has so much investment capital that like half their income is coming from stocks. That would technically still be petite bourgeoisie. Although many Marxists who cannot adapt what Marx was trying to express to the modern era do not seem to understand that. But anyways, regardless of this, capitalists are massively outnumbered. Start one more, but I'll probably have to cut the video partway through and go into another. Getting close to the end of the training fights. So in order, oh goodness, a Harpy Queen. This is gonna be an annoying fight. By annoying, I mean difficult. These things at high power level. Oh, it's not nearly as bad as in the Wizard's Tower, where there's one that's a boss surrounded by a bunch of smaller ones, and a Galaxy Brain or Super Grandmaster. It's like impossible. I could have just turned down the difficulty, though. Or maybe I was on Galaxy Brain, and it might be doable in Super Grandmaster, but it's my own choice, I guess, to not do that. But Armor Pen, Physical Power, I mean, the thing had like 8,000 physical power or something insane. Maybe it wasn't that high. No, it definitely wasn't. You can check the video. It's in one of my earlier playlists, the Wizard's Tower one, which I'll be coming back to. And so that one gets new videos as when I return to the Wizard's Tower, but probably I'll sequence them so they come after this run is done.
I will fear no Never turn your face from the cold. I will fear no evil.
Still, that Armor Pen I want to deal with. Skull Warrior has so much haste, it's really nasty, and then Harp Queen. The Bone Dogs. These are all tough. The least dangerous thing is actually Skull Mage, and it's not. No laughing matter. So I want to at least finish this thought here. So to maintain their position in society, because people who work for a living, who don't have masses of huge masses of investment capital, and so what they get is what they earn in wages mostly, are going to be resentful of, and rightfully so. This isn't like envy, it's not jealousy, it's a resentment because the money that people who own investment capital make from that investment capital comes from paying people who work for a living less than the value of their work. That's almost self-evident, even though you get people who try and twist people's mind to make that not clear or deny it, twist the facts, but it should be really obvious how this is. That money has to come from somewhere. It comes from businesses that utilize that investment capital. They obviously use it to do stuff like add new factories and such, new machinery in a factory, new computers, whatever they're adding, to grow the number of employees or to automate. But businesses utilize investment capital. Automation, Mark says this whole analysis of, but there are parts of it he's wrong about. He doesn't quite get automation correct, in my view, although he has very useful insights that are better than many of the capitalist ones. He's still wrong, nonetheless. But that's because he failed to see. He was right about automation as it existed in his era, but it changed in nature somewhat, and there were things that happen only at long intervals that he didn't witness happen. He could only write about what he was able to observe, basically, and there are things he observed that do occur. So they make his analysis wrong, but automation. But with regards to expansion, businesses get the investment capital, they expand, they sometimes, because they keep so little in cash reserves, they actually just use the capital to stay afloat because they had stock buybacks and times are good. And then when times are a little harsher, they actually have to borrow money to last till next time times are good, and they can do stock buybacks again. During which the investment capital might be selling stock and people buying it. That's one form of investment technically. Well, the stock market's become more casino than actual investment. Which Mark's right about, speculative capital and fictitious capital.
Let's make this quick.
And basically this kind of speculation, he wrote extensively about it. He also predicted stuff like Bitcoin, interestingly. It's funny, he predicted essentially Bitcoin, but he did not predict certain things about how computers would affect automation. Guess you can't get them all.
These elven eyes have seen much
All
suffering.
right, it's my turn now.
But stuff kind of like Bitcoin and these get-rich-quick schemes are fundamentally not that different than things that exist in this era, whereas computers are something totally different. Great cover. Actually, I'll keep them further back there.
Let's make this quick. There's a storm on the horizon. Long have I watched,
Who needs
man.
saving?
Where is my hat? The elements do my bidding.
The darkness will not rise.
Boom. That's a good start. I think. Actually, I don't want the cop to go that way, but whatever.
We are pilgrims in an unholy land.
Spectre's gonna be a huge problem, though. It's definitely killed someone in my party. With its death bomb ability. Okay, you can only do that once per turn. Doom is less dangerous. Although the fear effects. Sorry. And if you get the cough, noise canceling removes it a lot of time. Which, I mean, I guess before I updated computers and got the noise canceling stuff, people did complain about the cough on some of my very early streams, so I don't remember, it was in the comment section. I think of my people on Discord I knew who'd watched it, but it is an improvement, I suppose.
Be it
Enabled partly by AI processing, actually. Computers, as I was saying. I'm no Luddite, though. AI is a potentially very dangerous thing, not like anything we've messed with before, and who owns the AI is the huge problem. In the hands of a socialist government or socialist workers' cooperatives, it would be good for humanity. In the hands of giant corporations, it can be extremely dangerous, used for things like surveillance pricing and all sorts of price fixing schemes. That because the AIs are black boxes, it becomes hard to prove that the price fixing is going on. And thus they get away with it, the capitalists. Protect against death bombing. Resistance. Let me just do it to him. Rock already has substantial resistance, though.
I sentence you to more life.
Boom.
I do not seek glory.
I know, not playing optimally, but, you know, progressing pretty quick, I think. At least relative to my norm. So here I go again. So privileged position in society. People are going to resent it because the money ultimately comes from them. And they want that money so that they don't live in poverty or, you know, can't afford healthcare, whatever. I mean, that's absolute poverty anyway. If you can't afford healthcare, housing, clothing, necessities of life, that's poverty. Doesn't matter if it's not relative poverty. If everyone's living like that, it's absolute poverty. Absolute and relative poverty refer to how you're doing relative to others versus how you're doing relative to basic human needs that exist regardless of how your neighbors are doing.
You're not gonna like this.
So relative poverty, you could have everyone living very, very well, but you can't afford a luxury car to show off. That's relative poverty. But a lot of Americans are actually living in absolute poverty. They can't afford housing, can't afford health care. They're one paycheck away from ending up out on the streets. And their housing they are getting is very poor quality. Yeah, there are some people in big mansions, while others are living the way I just described. Immense inequality. And what separates the two is sometimes ownership of investment capital, but sometimes, and this is what I was trying to get to,
Is the magic of man.
The capitalists, in order to hold their position of privilege, they realize they can't keep everything for themselves. They can't keep all the money. They would like to keep all the money, but if they do, they would have a revolution on their hands very quickly. So they need to create a group of what might be called compradors or collaborators with their power. They need to create a group of people who they allow a somewhat better quality of life, and in exchange, those people are loyal to them and help them maintain power and won't turn on them and help keep down the rest of society. People will often say that the police serve this function, that especially in military dictatorships, although we're seeing this coming to be the case in the U.S. as well, the military. I mean, the military is being used to stifle protests in LA right now in June, as I say this. Los Angeles is not foreign soil, I may remind you, but it's not that common and uncommon in the rest of the world. All the little military dictatorships the United States has popped up over time. This is the imperial boomerang. This is methods of oppression that were used abroad coming
back to the U.S., but it's not entirely just that. I mean, countries the U.S. hadn't dominated at the time have done these things, like, you know, fascist Italy. It's also fascism. And people say that word's overused, but it really is appropriate in this case. America really has been sliding fascist. People maybe use the word, and then, while they don't see a dictatorship yet, so they think that word was overused. But what people are really concerned about is that it's a slide into fascism, that we inch closer and inch closer and inch closer. And perhaps they get the wrong impression what they mean, or people willingly misunderstand people use that term. But we are inching closer to fascism. I mean, heck, even the neoliberals, that is, right-wingers, like Reagan types, talked about how we were supposedly inching closer to, they didn't say fascism, because the fascism is not the boogeyman of the neoliberals. Feudalism is, so they wrote this book, The Road to Feudalism. I kid you not, it's utter propaganda and shit. But not even well written. Though Margaret Thatcher famously carried a copy around with her. I think it was that book. This is a piece of political hack writing by a third-rate economist who was propped up by big banks. By the way, there's no such thing as Nobel Prize in Economics. There is the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics, but it's not created by the Nobel Committee. It's created by the Central Bank of Sweden in 1969. It doesn't have the same standards. Just barely. Nope, that doesn't save him. Never mind.
We are pilgrims in an unholy land.
Looked for a second like he was gonna have like 2 health, but nope. Well, winning is winning, so whatever.
Your faith is weak.
Zeal strikes, here we go. Progress from lesser to greater. There we go. Those siphon as much AP as they cost, so we can just keep doing them. Well, most of the time.
I'm not used to all
But
this
so,
darkness.
the capitalist class need collaborators to hold into power, otherwise they'll have revolution on their hand. So they give a proportion of the population better quality of life. They pay them more wages than they could strictly get away with paying the people less. But if they did it, it would destabilize their hold on power. Now, it's rarely thought out in quite so explicit terms. A lot of how societies organize themselves kind of acts with a consciousness greater than that of any individual. So nobody specifically says, I'm going to create a collaborator. Although there are a few people who actually do on rare occasion. But usually, the mechanism is a little different than that. It doesn't really matter if I do this or not.
Eternal Dawn, I call upon your
So one enemy left.
There's a storm on the horizon. Never turn your face
It
from
might matter if I was, say, doing the Halloween campaign where there's permadeath, but
a divine faith.
this will send these guys this way.
Stay close.
Pretty sure the Kappa can finish off that Spectre, but
No way the Brock gets there in time. Oh, here we go. But, so the way we get there is a little more indirect, and it has to do with,
Anyone gets any paper cuts?
like almost everything else in society, people doing what seems beneficial to them in the here and now in a particular moment. And they just end up with these structures, these patterns in the end. So, you know, bosses finding that their workers are keep trying to unionize and they're not working hard enough for them. So they offer, you know, someone pay as a supervisor that's just a little bit better to force their fellow workers to work harder. And then the supervisors just not getting paid great, so they realize they should actually just take part in the unionization too. So then they create a higher level of supervisor above them, and eventually you work your way up. You create a pyramid structure, a hierarchy. The people near the top who are actually doing very, very well despite owning no investment capital, because they keep a large number of people further down the pyramid under control for the very rich. And so hierarchy is inherent to capitalism because this pyramid structure has to exist. This is why I do play Stellaris, and I will be doing Let's Play that. In the game, there's the ethics, authoritarian, egalitarian, and you constantly get, it's just this recurring theme in the forums of that game.
Till the break of dawn.
People say,
Men looking for this.
authoritarianism shouldn't be mixed up with capitalism and egalitarianism with socialism, because there's some socialist civics that you have to be egalitarian to take. Although there are some that would be more liberal left as well. So it's a mix of liberalism and socialism for egalitarian. But left-wing liberalism, so progressivism. It's a mix of progressive and socialist stuff, because technically neoliberalism refers to Ronald Reagan right-wing type stuff. So you'd find plenty of liberals on the authoritarian end, actually, because they pretend to believe these things and they don't really. I guess that's hypocritical liberalism. True liberals are few and far between on the right, but you do occasionally find principled liberals on the right, and they will actually usually stand up against people like Trump when they exist.
This will aid our quest.
Let's honor the dead by putting their gear to use.
But actually principled liberals are not that common. Rock the ability to hit diagonally?
To our cause.
Sure. But yeah, in that game, you see people complain about how basic authoritarian in that game is all wrapped up in hierarchy. I mean, if you will, not the classic, the most symbolic, the flagship feature of authoritarian, flagship features of authoritarian in that game are a stratified economy, which involves a large discrepancy between what the upper classes and the workers at the bottom are paid, essentially, and slavery, access to utilizing slavery, or its, quote, more civilized form, indentured servitude, which could be literally indentured servitude, like in the colonization Americas, or it could just be like really severe wage slavery. You can think of it as however you want. It's intentionally vague what it means. In fact, there are references to the people not actually legally being enslaved, but just being super deep in debt with certain events. But sometimes it may be legally. It's left vague, as I said. But people don't like the association with capitalism with slavery, even though slavery was literally a feature of capitalism. It was ownership of humans as property, as private property, not personal property, is a means of production owned by one person,
having another human being be that means of production of his own. That was what slavery was. It's capitalist to its core, so it absolutely belongs together. And stratification absolutely comes with capitalism. You don't have to run a stratified economy if you're authoritarian installers, but it's often beneficial to do so. You could actually run social welfare, which is relatively small discrepancies between the upper and lower classes. That's the most equitable structure you can run as an authoritarian. There's actually, you can run a utopian abundance if you're egalitarian in that game, which authoritarians can never run. But stratified economy absolutely belongs with the more capitalist themed stuff with authoritarian, because capitalism relies on stratification to maintain its stability very often. The wealthiest individuals in society are the capitalists, and they create a hierarchy that acts to oppress the lower classes so that they can maintain the grip on power, and they have collaborators in stratified economy. So ours, for instance, your specialist class will still actually be relatively privileged, and in its most extreme form, there's a civic called oppressive autocracy, where enforcers are the only group besides the rulers who get paid anything. So the police. Yeah, the student makes stars. Well, paradox, they're based out of Sweden, which Sweden is also where the Swedish central bank that created the fake Nobel Prize in economics comes from. Sweden is torn between very right-wing elements like that central bank and the majority of the population there being very left-wing. For a long time, the Social Democrats, which is like Bernie Sanders type people, having a iron grip on political power for generations in Sweden, from after World War II to around the 90s, late 80s, when that started to weaken. And at its zenith in the late 70s-ish, that actually progressed to enough socialists becoming members of that coalition that they actually tried to move Sweden to socialism by reformist means, to actually nationalize all the largest companies in Sweden gradually over a period of time. There was this plan that was proposed that unfortunately a committee was formed to study it, and then it was watered down to the point, we'll only take 4% ownership of the companies over 15 years. That's nothing. That's not enough to give a government that was controlled by it. Sweden was a democracy, I'm sure you're aware, during the Cold War. Democratically elected government control over the largest corporations. You need more than a 4% ownership stake for that. A lot more. So it was watered down to the point of being useless. And this happened because the elements that wanted a more aggressive version started to lose a lot of their momentum, I guess you would say, as the Soviet Union was showing signs of moving towards collapse. And people were becoming, socialism isn't ever going to work. Well, the Soviets are probably about to collapse, which they did collapse. They collapsed in large part, though, because not of the economic crisis they were facing that era, which they could have weathered, but because of Gorbachev's reforms, which are extremely destabilizing. If you make drastic reforms in a time of crisis, you better hope the reforms work, and that the people working on implementing the reforms are doing them in good faith, which many people in Gorbachev's administration were not doing them in good faith. In fact, some openly came out, in particular one of his people in charge of media reform, with memos after the Soviet Union fell that they were openly, or not openly, but they came out openly later, that they had in fact secretly been working to tear down the Soviet Union from within to restore capitalism because they hated socialism and wanted it gone. These are people in the government of what was supposed to be a socialist government. Of course, it was Marxist-Leninism, a one-party state, and I said before, you need multi-party politics. You need the competition between different socialist parties to keep any kind of party discipline and to actually prevent something like that from happening. And so that if things go badly, people don't just blame socialism, they blame the incompetent leaders who might have helped make things go badly.
and maybe replace them by switching ruling party while still from one socialist party to another. Now, this could be the very cynical, like, you could have just two parties that flip power, like in the US, and that's not very democratic. You could have a legitimate democracy with 5, 6 different parties, you know, as many as people want to form, but usually most systems stabilize around 5 or 6 parties if people are allowed to form as many parties as they want. It depends on the particulars of how thresholds for seats and parliaments and such. Some countries stabilize at like 7 or 8 parties, some at 5 or 6. Arguably more is better. I don't agree with there's these like political theorists who try to argue it's better we have 4 or 5. And honestly, they're just trying to get all of Europe to go to 4 or 5 and then say, oh no, we want 3 and then 2. They're trying to get it to be like the US in inches. And not all of them have that plan, but some do. And there's certainly billionaires who are funding the ones who are moving things in that direction because they want it to be just like the US, a 2-party dystopia. But yeah, so you have people who act as collaborators unknowingly, unwittingly to the very powerful, and they get paid extraordinarily well. Especially people work in sensitive industries. I've had family members who worked in defense industry, and they get ridiculous money, and it's not just because they had like scientific engineering skills. It's because, their role was partly to be part of a privileged elite in society. Someone's got to be a privileged elite and help form the basis of voting for in these billionaire parties and maintaining a certain level of stability. Then why not the people make your weapons? And throughout American history, the size of this group, privileged group, has waxed and waned. This group is, and I'll finish with this, there's a name for this. This isn't something Marx failed to predict. This is something he predicted precisely. He called this group of collaborators that would exist under capitalism, that did exist in his time, and he predicted become a more developed feature of capitalism in the future, as indeed happened, the labor aristocracy. To reference how this term probably sounds nonsensical to many of you, under feudalism, there was the king, and he maintained an aristocracy like nobles, dukes and such, who were answered to him. He was in charge of them. They were not free to do as they wished. Ultimately, they had to do as the king said, but they had, great latitude to control those underneath them. They lived in lives of great privilege. And there were ranks of aristocracy, major and minor. This whole pyramid structure that exists in feudalism, where there were, just a few dukes, but there were more counts, there were more, barons kind of thing. The labor aristocracy is not literal titled hereditary lords anymore, but it is a group that exists to help the people at the very top maintain their power. And so certain careers are less exploited because, for instance, the very powerful realize it would be dangerous to hyper-exploit people in the defense industry because then they might be tempted to leak defense secrets to other countries. It might actually still be more profitable to do so, but if you need someone to be loyal to you, why not the people who, if they're not loyal to you, might leak defense secrets? This idea, oh, well, their loyalty is worth the price they're paid. No, it's not. They're paid more than their loyalty is worth because their loyalty in that sense, because their loyalty to the capitalists is what's really being bought. I have some shitty family members who, because they enjoyed for a time this labor aristocracy status, even as it's starting to evaporate in America as things are changing, they still are vehement capitalists and refuse to see that capitalism is the problem. That nothing humans do will ever not be subverted, destroyed, manipulated, controlled, abused, and perverted by capitalism. Sooner or later, it will destroy everything, including the planet we live on, through climate change. So it has to go. It has to go. That's why I'm a democratic socialist, an eco-socialist. You might say I would like to see in an ideal world, the U.S. have a new constitutional convention someday, make changes to allow for socialism, and then if a socialist party ever gets elected, with protections that socialist parties can't be banned and such, more explicit protections, and then further constitutional amendments that would ultimately codify the protection of the environment into the U.S. Constitution, and would codify that private ownership of the means of production is illegal. People can do workers' cooperatives, there can be nationalized businesses, there can be local ownership businesses, people are free to do anything else, just private ownership, make it illegal. This obviously can't be done in one step. First, we need to get something like a true multi-party democracy. It's not just Democrats and Republicans, and get billionaires so they can't completely control the politics and the media. Then maybe socialist parties can come to power and try and push through constitutional amendments. There's a legal process to do it. And many socialists think that's impossible. And that's why some of them want to like rise up and do a revolution because, I mean, the violent type in that case, there's also peaceful revolution, which is just like mass strikes and protests till the government collapses. But many of them want to do that because they think it's impossible to achieve. And it might be exceedingly difficult, 1 in a million chance, but live in a world where the tools of oppression and suppression of revolutions become so sophisticated that revolutions are also impossible. They're even less likely to succeed. I don't think people realize how willingly the billionaire class will gun down millions of people in the streets with machine guns if necessary to maintain their hold on power. And that's what Trump is in danger of doing. That's why it's so uncomfortable that soldiers are being sent to police Los Angeles, because this is slowly moving us towards that place. It might not be Trump it is, it may be JD Vance. Trump might die of a heart attack because he eats like shit. It might be in 6, 8, 10, 12, but it's gonna 20 years, but it's gonna happen eventually. There's gonna be protests that are really big, and it's gonna be like in The Handmaid's Tale. If you watch the TV series, they go have flashbacks, and there's U.S. soldiers gunning down crowds, or like what people become traitors to the Republic because they actually end up turning, and then there's the loyalist soldiers who go and flee to Canada and Alaska. The people who ultimately do a coup against the government, and they gun down crowds with machine guns, and that's where things are headed, because it's cheaper to maintain that kind of oppression these days than it is to maintain a well-paid labor aristocracy. All right, well, I wish you folks all the best. Take care of each other, be kind yourselves, and may you always find a guiding star to lead you home. Adieu. Best luck.